Hello and welcome everyone to the Q&A sessions with Meeta and Jo Ellen. We have Tosh on summer hiatus. Jo Ellen is here as our guest this week again. Welcome back, Jo Ellen. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. And I just so appreciate joining these because as we were talking before we went live, we could just talk forever about communication. We keep going deeper and deeper. And I was saying that at Impact Factory, we run sort of 3 courses on communication, one on conflict. It's endless and endless. And we're always learning about how to be better communicators.
Yeah. For us, we've been advising a lot on communication both ways. So one is helping managers and people leaders communicate clearly with a collaborative tone in their language. But also we've been helping employees learn how to communicate with their managers and peers, because actually this hybrid working world means that people have lost the ability to communicate by assimilation or osmosis, just by watching, and so much communication is done from just observing and watching people's body language, and that's gone.
Yes.
So I think it's safe to say that every manager, every person should not assume that they know how to communicate in a hybrid world, and that's why we chose to do today, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is this thing, we were talking about it, and we'll get to it in more detail, but the thing you just mentioned about the stuff you pick up, the gossip, the little things, you notice things, and you can either nip something in the bud or find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And the whole thing around hybrid is it's very easy to have a bit of out of sight, out of mind. And that's a danger. So you've got good people working who you think, well, Joan will just get on with it. Meeta will just get on with it. They're good. I don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
Which is not good because they need, the people like us need that kind of support as well. But even more so is perhaps the underperformers. Oh, we'll just leave them and hopefully they'll sort it out. It'll sort itself all on its own.
Yeah,
I'm seeing that increasingly in the feedback we're getting of why people come on courses is how do I deal with the underperformers, because I've just let them to do their thing, them to do their thing. Not good.
Out of sight is out of mind a little bit, and unfortunately, accountability. With hybrid working, people coming and going from the office a bit more, accountability on managers' shoulders is growing. The expectation out there of the market, of what people want to see, results, it's all pushing on and up, isn't it? So
it is. I think there's an added element right now, of course, because we aren't out of the pandemic. So this uncertainty, do I go in? Do I stay home? Do I get on public transport? I think hybrid working is here to stay in some form, but it hasn't evened out yet. It hasn't found a rhythm. It hasn't found a way of working yet, because there's still this other element that people are dealing with.
Yes. And I'm a big believer that the success or failure of an organization or a team is all down to communication, because the language we use sets our behaviors, and our behaviors set our path for success or failure.
Yes.
So this is a topic that both Jo Ellen and I feel so strongly about. As you said, Impact Factory are built on communication as your specialism in many different ways, and your courses reflect that. And for us at the main group, whether we're recruiting new talent into our client world or whether we're helping them retain them through, enhancing success on the ground, it's all about how people present themselves and how they present a challenge. And, we've got a poll today, and it's interesting. The poll is asking, what are your biggest communication challenges and what is undermining your communication success? So the 3 options that Jo Ellen and I put together is, number 1, not being kept in the loop. So the whole, I didn't know that. And then all of a sudden it undermines the work you're doing somewhere else. I think the attacking, blaming language, sometimes this language isn't even about being aggressive, but it can sometimes be, I need this, I need that, you've done that. It can be done very calmly. And actually it removes that collaborativeness that we're all on a journey to create the success of our team and our business, right?
Absolutely. And I'm seeing that the poll is it's even.
Moving around.
Even horses here.
Yeah. And the third one is miscommunications and misunderstanding. How many times do we have a conversation and then someone comes in afterwards and says, well, I didn't like that. And you're thinking, were we in the same room? Was that the same conversation? So.
Well, the added thing for that, and this is pre-pandemic, pre-hybrid, anything, is also the way we communicate via email. And that opens up enormous opportunities for miscommunication. And so we have a phrase at Impact Factory. I think we stole it from somebody. I can't remember who, which is miscommunication is the norm. That often that we miscommunicate or misunderstand more often than we actually understand. And sometimes we catch it. What did you mean? Or, oh, no, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
And it's almost part of our language, but it's the other stuff that gets untalked about or unexposed, or it goes underground, and that can fester.
Yes. Yeah. It's all about when we communicate with somebody, they will receive that information based on where they are at that moment. Yes. And the 3 areas that we're covering is around bridging the communication gap because of the hybrid working world. So as Jo Ellen said, out of sight shouldn't be out of mind. Yeah. Top techniques for instigating and handling difficult conversations. Things like, if it is difficult and there's going to be a challenge, really pick your moment, think about the language, think about what that person's done or how, is doing, or what their mindset is before you go into that conversation, because that all will help you get success out of that approach. Yeah. And the third one is the importance of feedback. And Jo Ellen, you were saying about how the good people, managers often think, oh, they're great, they're getting on with it. But actually, good people need feedback too, if not more, because they want to do even better.
Absolutely.
So we have a chat box on the right-hand side here. And as always, your comments, your questions, or even a scenario that you have, if you want to share that with us, Jo Ellen and I can angle our conversations towards giving you some advice or solutions within the next 30 minutes. Our sessions, we try to keep to 30 to 40 minutes. We know how busy everyone is, but we hope that you can walk away with some real value add approaches to communication that will help you create more success in your world. Okay. So, Jo Ellen, where shall we start?
I know. I've got so many notes that I was writing beforehand, before we met, which is, ways to communicate in a kind of, I don't want to say benign, but a thoughtful, empathetic way. So one thing that it's just a tiny little phrase, but if people can include it in their language, because you really are big on language, how it affects and shapes, well, I am too, but how it affects and shapes how we are perceived, how we perceive others, and the messages we give. So rather than say, well, you're always late, Meeta. So as soon as I go into blame, those words like always, never, blah, 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 you get defensive. Yeah. But the tiny little phrase that I love is, I noticed that.
Yes.
I noticed that 3 times this week you were late to Zoom meetings. Yes. I noticed that, you seem to have a little bit of difficulty getting your reports in on time. The I noticed that takes the charge away from the heat behind it, the heat that I'm feeling.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges people feel when they're approached is that they feel that they're picked on.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can think, well, why am I being singled out? And I think even before we go in with a reflection of what's been happening, I think it's important when the ideal time is when you induct someone, and then every quarter or something, to make sure that everyone agrees on what your standards of excellence are and what good looks like in your team and in your business. Because then when you can say, look, I noticed you were running late, and that's something we've all agreed that we won't do, then it makes it objective and not subjective. Exactly. So I think always set the scene. The best time is the first time they join, and continually, if you haven't done it, do it now. The second best time is now. So agree on what you stand for. It can be 3 things, it can be, we communicate with honesty, we communicate with respect, we're always on time, and we meet our deadlines, or we let people know if we're not going to meet our deadlines. And it could be, the most basic of agreement of what you as a team will work towards. Because then, Joanna, when you say I've noticed, they were expecting it probably.
Yeah. How could you know? And this is the thing about communication, is that when we're communicating in a healthy way, you're not ashamed of your behavior. You are saying, I screwed up, or because I am the first one I believe in role modeling behavior, that I will, as soon as I see a mistake, I let people know that I've screwed up with something, because even people who don't need to know that because it's, if Jo Ellen can do it and she's the boss, if she admits that she made a mistake, then it's okay for me to admit I made a mistake as well. So there's something about, holding up your hand and having that communication be okay, that mistakes aren't something to hide from or hide under the carpet, but there's something just to say, okay, I made a mistake, and how can we fix it? But I've seen too many scenarios where people will pretend they didn't, and everybody knows that there's been a mistake. They probably know who made it. And it just gets messy. It gets tangled, because it's like a little kid saying, I didn't put my hand in the cookie jar when 5 cookies are missing.
And that actually takes up more headspace and energy than actually addressing what the challenge is to start with. And you spoke about the I have noticed approach, and that is something we do when we talk. I mean, we're going to talk about feedback at the end, but actually I think feedback is laced throughout this session, because again, if we have an agreement of what good looks like, and if you could do this and say, right, as your manager, we're all working in 2 locations, but we're one team. Can everyone submit? You could do this in a group together over pizzas and beer, or you can do this, on a Zoom and get everyone to put their comments, depending on, what works for you. But you could have everyone put their ideas of what they think is conducive to success for your team. And then you could pick the most popular, or you could pick the top 3 or something and say, right, for the next month, we're going to measure these. And I think that, again, it just gives people an opportunity to feel like they are not passive on their journey to success. And then that I have noticed, and what you'd like to see comes from that, be really good if you can lead by example. And I think people need to be asked how they like to receive feedback as well.
Absolutely. Because people do have different responses. Some like a little bit, I don't want to say pussyfooting around, but, some like it just tell me what's going on. And other people actually do have to be handled more gently, a little more sensitivity, because of their own personal issues, perhaps, that are brought into the room. And you said it before, that people receive communication from where they're at now, but they also we all receive communication from our history. So, unresolved issues will color how we receive information and how we give it as well.
Yes, so true.
So some of the ways of like the I noticed that, it's also, I said it before, but I think it's worth reiterating, that we will come with heat. We will come with annoyance. We will come with being pissed off with somebody. Yeah. And we have to, as managers, ameliorate that. We have to sort of negate it. And sometimes these formulas or these little phrases just help you keep the heat down in yourself, help you get to an even keel. And one of the others is just letting know, rather than you, which is what you want to do. You want to say, you did this and you, but it is letting someone know the effect that their behavior has had.
Yes. Completely. I use the language about POV, using the point of view when you start a conversation.
Absolutely.
It's not to say, I need you to do this, but if you start to say, in order for you to be successful, or in order for you to, sustain and grow your credibility, it's important that. So actually you can start with the I have noticed, and then you can go into in order for you, because then the person you're speaking to starts to feel that this is to help them rather than an attack on them for what's happened. Because as a manager or as a business, we just want great outcomes with successful, happy people, right? So, but that's hard. That I've noticed, and that in order for you, the POV approach, that's a little bit like flexing a muscle. It's like you need to do a little bit of prep. And so
we haven't talked about this, but I think we're describing emotional intelligence, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because it is around maturity. It is around not being the angry parent, but actually being the adult in a situation where you are looking for that collaborative relationship with people, and it's not so skewed. The other thing I would add to your, almost a third thing, so we've got, I noticed that and something about you, but also the impact on the team. So that how is this affecting the business, or how is this affecting the team? So that triumvirate of how you can put something to somebody actually, again, takes the heat out, but also it puts the responsibility back onto the person.
Yes.
And that's really important, is that we need more and more to have other people taking accountability and responsibility.
Yeah.
And that builds their emotional intelligence as well.
Yes. And then that language is used peer to peer rather than it being from manager to member of team. It becomes where everyone brings each other along. And actually, when people think about language, it's like the word can't. They say, I can't. Well, we put the word yet at the end. It's I can't yet. Completely reframes how we look at a problem. Yeah. And so it's agreeing as a team, as a collective, that this is what we stand for. And you can revisit that. And everyone, if you're not doing it, make sure you do have your monthly or quarterly socials, because in these tough times when interacting is not as natural, it's important to be able to play together and work together. And you can make that your first 15 minutes of any, social, to say, right, let's do some reflecting, and everyone bring one positive and one challenge. And I just think that, as you said, Jo Ellen, with hybrid working here to stay, communication, so much that was happening isn't, because of the subliminal, because of not just your team, but watching other people and walking into the canteen and seeing somebody from another department. You pick up so much. None of that there as much. It's still there, but it's not as easy. So let's really start to think about the clarity, the timing of communication, the language, and consistency.
Yes.
It's so key. It's so key.
Couldn't agree with you more. And we get so bogged down, I think, in our day to day, or I certainly know that I can, that it takes the extra effort. And I think this is now the third week I will say, I'll say it again, that we have to slow down. We have to give time to things that we didn't have to give time to before.
Yeah.
We have to give thought to things. We have to be more thoughtful in the way that we look at our team, who's not there, not physically there, who is physically there. I'm not physically there at Impact Factory. Other people are. Yeah. So the core team is pretty much there, and I'm not. So that means that I have to work a little harder. They have to work a little harder as well. Yeah. And I think that you can't act as though what existed before is what exists now. And I do think that's where some of the problems lie, is that people are having, or managers are having expectations, and staff as well, employees, that it will be like it was, that what happened before is happening now, and it's just not. So the fact that you have to slow things down and think about things you didn't have to think about before is key, in my mind.
And I think that now is the time, whether you share our webinar with other people in your organization, whether you get in touch with us afterwards and you want to hear about the courses. We never run these sessions as a sales pitch. We share these sessions to impart not only what we know, but what we're picking up that's going on in the market, and for our network here and our online family to know that you're not alone. Yeah. Because often we can be quite frustrated, and hybrid working is very isolating for those that aren't. And then a miscommunication can feel so much bigger than it might be when you're in the office and you say, oh, what did you say? I missed it, or you see someone talking in a corner and you walk over and say, oh, what's going on? You can't do that. So take this time to deliberately refresh and coach your people on communication. You know, Jo Ellen, moving us into the second part of our session today around instigating and handling difficult conversations.
Yes.
This is one of the courses that we ran for business assistants to high level directors and CEOs of business, because you can imagine these CEOs and business owners are busy, under pressure. They don't tend to use great language, and these business assistants need to be able to impart strategy and rules and a to-do list outwardly, but some of it needs to go back to the CEO to say, this isn't consistent, this isn't clear. And we were talking about two types of conversation. One is the planned conversation, or how about handling a conversation that comes at you from the manager or from someone who attacks you, and how to deal with that. So there's two types of difficult conversations that you can handle.
Well, I'm going to add a third,
okay,
which is other people's conflict that you're drawn into and have to manage.
Okay.
So, because that, I think, happens a lot where two people are in conflict in a team and you have to be the referee.
Yes.
Or
a bit like
the referee.
Counseling. It's communication, isn't it? Just before we go into that, actually, our poll shows that miscommunication is a third of all challenges. Attacking and blaming is 20%, and not being kept in the loop is 50%. So this section is so important, how to handle difficult conversations. And we've got a comment from Chris saying, I think we need also to keep the internal language radar working when we speak to others, the radar that assesses what we're thinking just before we say it, and ask, how will this feel to the recipient? Yeah, absolutely. If we disturb somebody in the middle of something, they're not going to have the headspace to receive what we're saying, are they?
Well, this goes back to the emotional intelligence. Thank you, Chris, again. That if I'm on the warpath, and I need to tell you off, or I need to let you know what's going on, it's totally from my point of view. It's totally from my perspective. It's totally from what's going on with me. And whether it's going upwards because I'm an employee or with my team, I have to be aware of the impact. So it is around timing. It is around, is this the appropriate place even to be having this conversation? Am I preparing someone? The difference between saying, oh, Meeta, could I have 5 minutes? And you're thinking, I wonder what for, or can I have 5 minutes so we can discuss the Benson report? So, flag, okay, I didn't finish that, or whatever it might be. Do I say it across a crowded room? Because I have been in situations where that's happened. Oh, Meeta, I need to see you for 5 minutes. So everyone's like, oh, I wonder what's going on there. So all of that is very important in how you phrase what you want, in terms of what you want from somebody, and the impact that your communication will have. I also think that managers don't realize how much is projected onto them. So that whether you think it's healthy or not, it is mommy or daddy. It happens on such a subliminal level. And it's not as though, and I've said this before about infantilizing people, it's just recognizing that your role is pivotal and how people perceive you is pivotal. And you do have to think about your language and think about how you present it.
That's very interesting you say that, because the parent-child relationship is that the child knows really before they can even speak that without this person, I won't survive. So literally that person becomes their everything. And sometimes fortunately, sometimes unfortunately, those relationships can be healthy and challenging, and the person carries that for the rest of their life and has to deal with it. In a management and team scenario in a business, it's very similar. A manager can make or break or facilitate or obstruct somebody's success in their career. And we know that our careers and putting a roof over our heads, food on the table, it's everything. So we hold a big responsibility. And somebody explained something to me about 10 years ago, which I think when I bought out the main group and I became not just a managing director who ran the business, but a CEO who was there to lead my people, the language had to change. And she said, the more senior your position, the louder what you say is, the more strength it has. So you may say something, Meeta, and a manager may say something, but because you're saying it, it has 5 times the impact and power, and it affects people. So not only think about who you're talking to and where they are when they receive it, but actually think about, should the CEO talk to everyone about that, or should the CEO impart it to the manager, who then uses their language to impart it down to their employees? So really think about the channels and the lines of communication, because that for me was just, oh yeah. Well, it wasn't an oh yeah, because I never knew, but it was right, okay. It made me rethink everything about the way and what language I use and how much I impart.
I want to carry on with that theme, because we all have a default way of communicating.
Yeah,
we do. We just do. And we will also have a default way of managing conflict. And that isn't necessarily healthy.
No.
That it just repeats it. And I think sometimes that we forget what the purpose of conflict is. And even though people say it's a win-win, actually, in my mind, and the way we run things at Impact Factory, the purpose of conflict is to get to a resolution.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want a win-win. That isn't always possible, but it has some kind of resolution where people go away feeling that they've been heard, that they've been listened to, and that something different is going to happen. If you just keep going round and round the same ways that you've communicated and managed conflict, it won't resolve anything. And I've seen that too many times myself.
Interesting what you said, that when the person is speaking, that there's a belief that something different will happen. Because if you're speaking and your manager looks like they're not listening, is on their phone or distracted or whatever, immediately your heart sinks, doesn't it? Because you've made that effort to go up and say something, but you think it's falling on deaf ears is what you're thinking. And people will retreat. And as a manager in a business, we want open lines of communication. We want clarity and authenticity. So I use this technique where I speak to people when they're receiving a challenging conversation, is to say, you know what, this is really important. I'm going to make some notes. Is that okay? And what that allows you to do is to not be looking in someone's face. It makes it less an attack. And it starts to be, I'm interested in what you've got to say. Let me write that down.
Yes.
And then you don't have to respond straight away. You can say, well, look, this has caught me. Yeah, this has caught me off guard, but I really do want to put some thought to this because it's important.
Yes.
So those kinds of approaches help people to feel something different is going to happen.
That whole thing about you just absolutely hit one of the nails on the head, of which there are many when it comes to conflict, around you don't have to respond right away on either side. Yeah. On either side. If you're taken aback or you need time to think, it's and I've talked about this before in a previous webinar we've done, is buy time.
Yeah.
I need time to think about that, Meeta, or you really need to give me till tomorrow, or I'm going to go away, make a cup of tea, anything that actually gives you time to think about the best way to respond, so that you're not just being caught off guard or on the back foot, but that you're not just saying the first thing that comes to mind. You are taking the time to be thoughtful and considerate about the response.
And if you do that, then your employees will hopefully start to see how they can also deal with it. So you can train this. And as you said, it has to be led by your behavior in communicating this way, so people have an example of what that looks like in practice.
And again, I'm going to talk about email, is that so often we get an email and we think, I have to write away this response right away.
Yeah. And even more than email now, I've written here is WhatsApp or instant messaging, because, first of all, I think that as in business, in an organization, we have our handbooks and we have our standard of we will communicate with you by email and phone. However, I know, sorry, I don't know why my phone it's my watch ringing, not even my phone. However, we know that in practice, drop them a little WhatsApp at 8:00 at night, or, a little Teams message, and all of a sudden we talk about the hybrid world and the lines of the working hours blurring. make sure, again, that you agree on how people like to be communicated with. Say, look, I do some of my work after hours, and I say to people, don't feel that you have to respond. I will put, and what I try to do is to WhatsApp in the day. I agree with my team that we can WhatsApp in the day, but in the evening, if I want to say something, especially with my senior leadership, I sort of have an agreement, but we don't do it too often. With the rest of the team, if I want to drop something to them, I email, because then it's a case of people don't always look at their emails, but people unfortunately are always checking their phones and keep getting drawn in. And sometimes that they can get their back up, and not because they don't want it, but it's just a bit of an intrusion on their space at that time.
Yes, I mean, I often will, because much like you, I'll have a think. Something will occur to me at like 3 a.m, and I wake up, and I will send an email and say, do not open this until you're at your desk. That'll be the subject line, just because I don't want people to feel any obligation. What I want is just to dump it. Or often what I do is I will write my emails and send them first thing in the morning.
Yeah,
I've become better at that, of just not feeling I have to send it when I write it, but I'll have a series of drafts that because I do often wake up in the middle of the night with thoughts. I'm sure everybody does, or nearly everybody does.
What you do with them and how people, again, I think if we show that we respect people's time, if there is an emergency, they'll know it's an emergency, not just Meeta flying off emails and things in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
So, yeah, definitely.
I want to get back to the whole conflict, or one of the things, I'm sure you've heard this, and anyone out there, don't do a praise sandwich.
Ah, yes. There's another phrase for it, but it would use an expletive. Is that right?
Yeah.
We do the good stuff, the bad stuff, and then the good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that actually, first off, you're set up because Meeta, you do this so well, blah, 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 blah. And you're feeling, oh yeah. However, the butt bat, as I call it, but you did blah, 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 blah. But you've forgotten about the praise. You're now whacked over the head because you've been given the however or the but.
Yeah.
And then you're praised again. So you're getting mixed messages.
Confusing.
And I think that if you have something to say to someone, yes, you have to choose your language, but just say it.
Yeah, I agree.
I seem to have a problem, or I notice that these things aren't being done. Let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah. The way I use praise in that space is to say that, this isn't everything. Actually, so many things are going right.
Yeah.
However, this is important because.
Yeah.
And you can do that in order for you to score higher in your appraisal, or in order for you to have, better communication impact, or whatever the outcome is that you want for that individual. Frame it right at the start so they understand where the conversation's going and how it's going to benefit them.
And also have the door. Well, two things. Always have a door open. Never box someone in, because you do that, you've lost them. You've lost their trust.
What do you mean by that?
Well, often we box people in by saying you did, the blaming, or the kind of, we're narrowing the space for them to be able to answer us honestly and truthfully. That's when the defensiveness comes. Defensiveness comes because you don't feel you have an out. So that's number one. And number two is always be ready with support. It isn't like I'm going to go off and tell you something and, you go off and deal with it. Have the support ready, or at least have the door open to find out what support someone needs.
Yeah.
This is really crucial, because people will, and again, I think this happens a lot with people working from home, as though they have to be able to handle it all. They have to know it all. And if they're struggling and floundering, it will get covered up often. So part of it is to uncover and then offer the support.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for anyone who is addressing a difficult conversation, or giving feedback, or having to performance manage someone, is not only think about where their headspace is when you're starting that conversation, how much you warn them, what preview you give, but actually think about what potential scenarios may come back. So when you say I have noticed, it would be great to Khalid. Yeah, really, absolutely great point. I hadn't thought of it that way myself, Khalid, and I think I'd adapted the praise sandwich for my own style. But it's so confusing, isn't it? I really like, and it's more authentic the way you said it as well, Jo Ellen. So I think authenticity goes a long way. But yes, so what I was going to say is, let's try, when you say I have noticed and what is going on there, it's thinking, is it a training issue? Is it a communication issue? Is it is there a misunderstanding in that? So start to think about options rather than going in with this person hasn't done that and this is
yes.
what, so be open.
A couple of interesting conversations here from Khalid. I've always been told to use that method when giving feedback.
Me too.
And I think that is often early on. People are told, make sure that someone feels good. And actually, good isn't the outcome we want. You don't want to crush someone, but you want to have a conversation. Yeah. Chris again. Yay, Chris. What we're doing here is igniting the fight-flight response and chemical reactions that requires. Absolutely. Good heavens, that is my phone. So sorry.
I love that ringtone.
It's Mozart. See, normally I would see one of the steps I didn't do today, which was to turn off my phone.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay. I love, Chris, what you're saying about the fact that actually it's primal, what we bring to the table, even though we're at work and we're professional. Yes, we're familiar and authentic, but actually our reactions initially are primal, and so much of what we think, so much of how we react happens instantaneously before we've even spoken. And we have to get that into check before we respond. And that's what you said. We need to think about how to present in a way that allows deep consideration, not an instant chemical reaction. So true.
Okay, so I think, Chris, I'm going to take this a step further for all of us, is that if we have good collaborative relationship with our team members, whichever way, up or down, we shouldn't actually ever need to put someone in a fight or flight situation, or the third F, which is freeze, because it's like we have an exercise we do, and this would be good for anyone out there just to think about this in their head. If we could maybe segue right into feedback right now.
That was our last section.
This is very interesting. And this is an exercise that works really well. You just could practice it with somebody, which is think about the person that you like best on your team. And we all have favorites. Come on, let's just admit it. Okay. So, and we need to give feedback, maybe not necessarily the nicest feedback, and think about how you would say that to them. And you would probably say, oh, Meeta, this little thing has come up, and you'd use all kind of softening language, and you'd be having good eye contact, and you'd be taking care of the other person. Then think, who's the person you have the most difficulty with? And see if the language in your way of giving feedback would change, and it will. Absolutely, it will. Your body language will change. You'll get more formal. Yeah. And if you can think about giving that same kind of feedback from person one to person two, you will have a much easier and more empathetic and more helpful conversation.
Yeah, it's what you said about we bring our history to a conversation as well as, what we do in our work. Our history joins us. So if a manager or someone's dealing with someone who they know is difficult, they're going to go in with more armor, but that's just going to create more defense. And Jenny says that the body reacts quicker than your brain. It really does. We communicate, we can feel things in our stomach, in our shoulders, in our, everywhere before a word has been, that's what's missing though, isn't it? This is the challenge of hybrid working, and why making assumptions, and this again is what we must ensure we don't do, is assumptions. Don't make assumptions. And the challenge of hybrid working and not always having everyone in the same space is communication is lost.
Yes.
And God, I feel like, Jo Ellen, we're coming up to the end of our session.
No.
We've literally just scratched the surface. I think I want you to give us a closing thought, Jo Ellen, before I do the poll, and then we're going to have to tie it up for today. But we're going to come back next week with more hybrid solutions.
Well, I think that I'm going to take a thing from Jenny, is if you are having a reaction, if you're having a strong reaction, step back and take a look at what that might be, whether it's about you, about the other person, about the situation.
Yeah. Wow, what a powerful session. And thank you, everyone, for your contribution and comments and thoughts. It's just been fantastic. And we hope you can join us again next week. Jo Ellen, I haven't even asked you, but I hope you're free and we can see you again.
I would love to join you again until Toss comes back. Bye-bye.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Jo Ellen, and we'll see you at 11 o'clock next Thursday.
Great.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.